started. My name is Bill Schultz, historical writer here at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I have with me today John Capelli, class of 1978, member of the Alumni Association Board. And first question, John, tell me about your background. Where are you from?
Well, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm a local. My father and mother came from Italy, never went to school much, didn't finish grade school, and demanded that all of us continue our education. Grew up in the back of a deli, selling prosciutto, capicola, salami, whatever we could do. Worked the checkout counter. My brother was 18 years older than I, and he left town the day I was born. He went to Marquette University and then subsequently to Marquette Medical School. Graduated in '56, and then I, a few years later, followed up and ended up at the Medical College myself.
So, and I've met your brother Paul, and so was Paul your impetus for, thinking that medicine would be for you?
Well, I always thought about that. Did Paul influence me to be a physician? And the answer has to be yes, because I don't think you can grow up with an older brother who achieves as much as he did and the pride that he gave my mother and father for his accomplishments. So I think intuitively that's where I probably found the field. However, I remember when I grew up that there was two things I wanted to do. I wanted to be good and I wanted to help people. And so I thought a policeman and fireman would be fantastic because, the bells and whistles. And then as I grew older, I experimented my whole thought process with the fact that maybe I wanted to be a doctor. So I wrote in my autobiography in grade school that when I was in 5th grade, I made the decision that that's what I was going to do.
Yeah, I find it's interesting. All the people that I've interviewed so far, how many, whether it was grade school, middle school, or into high school, at some point, they knew they wanted to be a doctor.
Another influential moment, and I remember back, was Dr. Schwartz, who came to the deli to buy some cold cuts. And I had chicken pox, and my mother said, Dr. Schwartz, can you go see my son? And I'll never forget the respect my parents paid to him and how he came up to the house and said, oh, Josephine, you got to close all the blinds. You can't have any sun in here. And it just amazed me. He was bigger than life. Actually, he was a very large man.
Well, that's neat. You've got like 3 stories about what got you thinking about being a doctor. So where did you do your undergrad?
I went to Marquette University.
Okay.
I was on a athletic scholarship. I wrestled.
Okay.
Division I.
Which I didn't know that.
I did that for 4 years. Found it to be one of the best things to build my self-esteem and help me build determination, which is an important part of success in healthcare, is to stay focused and to finish the project.
Well, so for you, it was a pretty natural progression from Marquette University as an undergrad to Marquette University School of Medicine. Did you go right away? Or as I recall, did you tell me one time there was a little break?
When I finished undergraduate, I was nowhere near prepared or had the profile of a student that this school would ever acknowledge, and rightfully so. College was a learning experience for me. As many people may tell you that they grew up in college, and I can safely say that academics were the least important thing that I gained from college. I ended up with a group of friends going to the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara, and I spent 2 years down there studying basic sciences in the medical school. And it was the most enriching and phenomenal experience of my life because I became bilingual. I lived with a family that now remains my family. I'm the godfather of the great-great-grandchildren. And we stay in touch every day on Facebook and the internet. And we go down there once a year. They come up here once a year. And it allowed me an opportunity to take the national boards, which I was able to pass. And Paul Rosenfeld, the man who I owe my entire life to, was the Dean of Students at that time, Dean of Admissions, and was able to help me transfer into the class of 78.
Yeah.
And so I began my career as an advanced placement student, and from there, the rest is history.
Yeah. No, and the thing that's interesting, first 2 years being those years where you most of those relationships are built with classmates, yet having worked with you on reunions and other things, you obviously those 2 years, the clinical years, you must have made it a point to really get to know your classmates, because you would not have guessed you were not there the first 2 years.
Well, first of all, I wanted to be accepted. I did not want to feel like I was a second-hand admission. Second of all, most importantly, I grew up believing in a team. I wrestled for 8 years, and teams were what I believed were the best way to live, to get along, family. And so I was very interested in my classmates to find out who they were, what they were about, what they did. And I felt that we had to come together as a culture, and we did. And I enjoyed the time we spent together out of school. We worked hard together, and we enjoyed life together. Yeah. And we became very close. I don't remember a person in my med school class that I haven't thought about once or twice in my life.
Yeah. And actually, your class of 78, for me, having worked with every class from 1945 through, the last graduating class, is always one of those that is in that top tier as far as reunions and everything else. And I know you're going to have some of these when I ask you, and that is, while here, and I granted you didn't do the first 2 years here, but the clinical years, any good stories about some of the faculty that you...
Oh, man. Now you're hitting me in the heart. The first story goes to Tony Pisciotta.
Yeah.
Tony Pisciotta was the man. He was the hematologist, Italian, who met Linus Pauling. He was a guy that spent his life on Saturdays and Sundays sitting in his little lab at the old county hospital building, looking at bone marrow samples, and he wanted to identify the stem cell. He talked about the stem cell, and he thought the stem cell was going to be important in his legacy. And the thing that I loved about him was that while he was looking in the microscope, he had opera in the background and knew the words to every song, and he would sing in various languages. My second story goes to George Steele. He was my attending here, and George Steele walked up to me the first time and said, "Who are you?" And I explained who I was, and he says, "Where did you come from? What school did you graduate from?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh my God." He said, "Every student from that school should be put on a boat out in the middle of the ocean and sunk." And I spent the rest of my career at the medical college trying to live up to his expectation. Harold Rose, a marvelous human being. James Serletti, another Italian inspiration to me, a man who had soul and gave his heart. Norm Engbring, historian who wrote the book on us. Dan McCartney, a wonderful man who came up to me and asked me if I would be willing to stay on as a teacher. And I said, "But Dan, I don't do research or clinical research." And he said, "Capelli, you'd be wasting your time doing clinical research. You should be a teacher and take care of patients." Donald Tresh, he was, along with Mike Keelan and Ron Siegel, the cardiology department, inspired us all. We all looked up to him, and and performed. That was another wonderful thing about our professors. They helped us understand who we were and how important we were to the health and well-being of our patients.
Those are good, all great people. Just, I'm happy that I got to know some of them pretty well before they passed. The other thing I was going to ask you about was, certainly, during the, okay, so from, 1978, you would have entered, what, in 73?
74.
74. So just, again, with your brother having been Marquette University School of Medicine, and again, interesting, his class of 56 was also a very active class. And you had that situation in 67 where Marquette severed the ties. 1970, the name gets changed. I mean, you were there just a few years after that, but your brother had gone through. Any thoughts about that time frame?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed. I wanted to graduate from Marquette Medical School like my brother. In fact, we were in the Kramer building down by Marquette University for our first years, and I fell in love with the Kramer building. It was the medical school. However, back then, my classmates and I, we understood the transition had occurred, and our class got behind the entire project of building a new medical school with a new name, and we actually even ran a fundraiser to get money to help pay for the new medical school. And that was the beginning of our legacy donations to the school, and I'm very proud of that. Also, the other thing that I thought was most important in terms of where I came from at Marquette was being a Jesuit-based university. Ethics and values were, of course, the most important. The nice thing for me is that medicine is born and based on values. You have autonomy, you have malfeasance and beneficence and justice. So therefore, I felt that those things were the building blocks of medical education, and you didn't need to have a facility, because after all the buildings are gone, what remains is what one's done for the human spirit. So I thought it's very important to let go of the past and look to the future.
The other thing, during anything going on, I mean, certainly this is after the Vietnam War, but anything, locally or nationally that you remember going on while you were in medical school?
It's a very interesting question, and when I think back about the time, and I think the period that I was in Mexico made me more aware of the global state of affairs, and Vietnam, of course, had ended or was, over, and that was a great time to live because you didn't have the threat of being drafted or have to go to Vietnam. But apart from that, it was a golden time in life. There weren't many challenges as far as I remember.
You continued with your residency here.
Well, I took a year off.
Okay.
I decided that I needed to find out if I could make it in the bigger world. So I tried to find the most busiest and hardest and most difficult internship in Bellevue in New York, Charity in New Orleans, and LA County in Los Angeles. So I decided to go to Los Angeles and do a rotating internship at LA County, 1,400 bed hospital, University of Southern California. No attendings, no staff, mostly residents running the place. Patients coming out of the yin-yang with all the hospitals deflecting their patients from their ER to our ER. It was mayhem, but it was the greatest experience of my life. After I got done with that particular program, I got a call from Jim Cerletti asking me if I'd be willing to come back and fill a position that had vacated. And I said, wow. I said, you remember me? He said, yeah. He said, I'd be happy to come back. So I came back and did 2 years here.
That's great. And I know you finished in 1981. I want to jump back a hair because in my time at the college, and I've looked at the plaque many times and always noted those students that were, won the Millman Award I always thought of as the most outstanding student of a graduating class. And reading the back of your award that you received, it talks about character, it talks about leadership, and I know that certainly any of the students that have received this were tremendously honored. I know you were too. Can you just tell me a little bit about your thoughts on being named the Millman Award winner?
Well, it threw down the gauntlet. It told me that I had a greater responsibility, and that I couldn't let the people that voted me to be in that position down. It was from my classmates, the staff, and I felt that the rest of my life had a journey. Yeah. Without great powers comes great responsibility, yeah. And that's a Spider-Man quote.
Yeah.
But the issue is,
I remember that.
The issue is that it always made me think, how could I do better? How could I do more? How could I make a difference? And so, yeah, it inspired me. Mm-hmm. And some of the people that graduated with that award, I've gotten to know closely over time, and great human beings.
It's a great group. It really is, and what a wonderful award. You're obviously a big family from Kenosha, and there's and did you? I know you've been practicing in Kenosha, your roots, for a long time. Did you, 1981 when you finished your residency, did you go right back to Kenosha?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
I went back, and my brother said, "Why don't you start in my office and work with me?" And I did. And after a year, I asked him if he could move out because I didn't have enough room. And he said, "Over my dead body, this is my office." Yeah. So I called my dad, and I said to my dad, "Are you done working?" He said, "Yep." And I turned the deli into a doctor's office. So the building that I was born and raised and lived in, I changed into my office, and I've been on my own block for the past 35 years, practicing medicine at home.
Okay. And I know where your home is, but I have not seen where your office is. But so you were solo practice for
yeah,
for all those years?
5 years. I began. I was associate faculty, assistant clinical instructor. Excuse me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I figured you. I thought you were.
Yes. In '81, Ralph Burnett started the family practice program for the medical college. Don Welter was a tremendous human being that I worked with, and Ralph Burnett. And we opened up a family practice program at St. Catherine's, and I was faculty for 12 years. And I was fortunate enough to hire 4 of our graduates. And with that, over a 10-year period of time, we went from my wife and I running a mom and pop doctor's office to a family practice clinic that became quite significant in the community over 15 years.
What was the clinic? What was the name of the clinic?
Capelli Shepler Family Medical Center.
Okay.
And Shepler was my chief resident. Mm-hmm. And after 5 years of solo practice, I asked him to come in, and he joined me, and we worked together to build a clinic.
You're the second. My last interview, Don Hireman, who helped get that family medicine program going, he said, "I hate to say it was selfish," he said, "but I was hiring those residents that I worked with, and you did the same thing." Mm-hmm. That's great. Those that you trained, you just hired and just built your clinic.
Right.
You're, and I know you've probably got many, but do you have a few of your career highlights that jump out at you? I know serving your community has been important.
Well, I mean, obviously, first and foremost is clinical practice. I've taken care of 30,000 visits, 1,500 deliveries, probably more than 1,500 deaths that I've aided and abetted. I've worked as a hospice medical director. I do my own rounds at the hospital. As I said, deliver babies, go to nursing homes. I've tried to fulfill the legacy of the old general practitioner, because that's what I like and that's what I do. My patients have my cell phone number. Some have my beeper number. which is unfortunate. But
Yeah.
the majority of my people respect my time and are very good to me.
Well, it's got to be
and-
exciting being in your hometown.
Yeah,
and
clinical practices. I've delivered babies that I've delivered their babies. So clinical practice would be number one. Number two, community. I've been recognized by numerous community organizations for service above self. Giving back to the community,
Yeah.
of course, is community-based effort. And then number three, I would say that my administrative and leadership skills. I decided when I was 50 that I needed a boost because I didn't have enough knowledge or experience in administrative medicine. So I went back and obtained my healthcare management degree, a 2-year master's program at Harvard. And I took that and used it to build our group. Now I think we're 70, and we have built a hospital. And not many hospitals are built in the state of Wisconsin, but we've flourished.
Yeah.
And so my administrative career has been kind of exciting as well. My family, of course, I don't want to neglect a successful 40 years of marriage, which is truly a success, and 3 wonderful children. And my son, my baby, is here at the medical college right now. And hopefully he'll come back and take over the practice because I don't know how much more I can do.
Yeah, well, you're gonna, you at least be working until he's done.
Correct.
Yeah, but and you want to work a few years together.
Well,
That goes without
I mean,
saying.
where am I going to go?
That's right.
You can bury me in my clinic.
Well, it's interesting, and I was gonna, ask you about that. And I've certainly met Peter. I've met your brother Paul. But your family though has other physicians that did like residencies here. Tell me about a few of the. I know there's a few others.
I'm always amazed at the fact that my brothers and sisters have been proliferative. We have, I think last count was I have 11 nephews and nieces that are physicians. My brother-in-law is a physician. My brother's a physician. My son's studying to be a physician. So when I look through the medical directory in our community, I think there's 7 of us locally. And my niece, who's a physician, married a physician, Dr. Schellpfeffer, who teaches anatomy here.
Mike's on the list to do an interview. We're going to get him in here. Yes.
Teaches right here.
Yeah.
And so our family has been very engaged and involved.
One of the things that's been a pleasure for me is, and I primarily worked with you early on with your reunions. And I still remember the reunion that you were you were leading the committee, and we're in the committee meeting, and all of a sudden, it dawned on you that you had to be at your Harvard program the weekend of the reunion.
Yep.
I felt so bad about that, but you took it in stride, and your wife showed up with all the slides, and they didn't even care that you weren't there.
Right.
No, I'm just
No, they did. Julie, well, she was here when we went to medical school, and she's very close to those classmates. My wife is actually, I was hoping I wouldn't lose her to one of my classmates.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, again, I've worked with you for over 20 years as a volunteer. More recently, got to ask you to serve on the Alumni Association board. Again, family members have come here. Your son's here. What? And I probably know you're a Millman Award winner. What has inspired you to stay involved with your alma mater?
Loyalty. That's number one. Appreciation for allowing me to do what I do today. Thanks for the education they gave me that made me the physician that I am. Boy, great question. Team, staying intact with my teammates.
Yeah.
The people that I've met and worked with. Our alumni president and I went to a medical mission in Honduras together. I mean, we're a family. Doctors and providers culturally, we're an extended family.
That's a good answer to my question. You know, I want to again jump back one more time because I did want to ask you any during career-wise, you've had interaction with probably a lot of other Medical College of Wisconsin and Marquette University School of Medicine alumni. Have any of your, obviously you've stayed in touch with a lot of your classmates, any in particular that you've stayed in touch with or have some stories that I can promise will only be seen by a few of us?
Well, obviously, the greatest story is that I got into trouble with having too many patients and too few docs. And I was overwhelmed and didn't know how to stop working all the time. And called up a buddy of mine that I went to med school with who was practicing out in the Southeast, Dr. Joel Carroll. And I said, hey, buddy, I need help. And he was looking for a change and picked up the pieces and came out to Kenosha, took over one of my clinics, and he's been my partner now for 30 years.
Oh, that's super.
And, you know, I see him every week and talk to him all the time. And it's a guy that I loved and worked with in med school, and now we're partners.
That's great.
Second story is, of course, Bruce Greene. You can only use expletives with this guy.
Yeah.
My greatest story on with him was to be honored to care for his parents, and also to be invited to the Pentagon, the Medal of Honor room, to see him get his third star as a Surgeon General of the United States Air Force. What a guy.
I would.
Third story, and one guy that just amazed me in medical school, Joe Ackerman.
Yeah.
When I read about his accomplishments as the clinician, researcher, caregiver, writer, author, president of the American College of Orthopedics, I said to myself, wow, I should really get to work. You know, there's just my classmates, what an incredible accomplishments by many of them. And you know, if a classmate, you know, just went and took care of patients and succeeded and kept his mouth shut, what an incredible accomplishment that is.
I agree.
You know, so I would say we got some shooting stars, but we also got, you know, the blue-collar doc out there. And I consider myself more of a blue-collar doc than a shooting star. But
Well,
that's the way it is.
Well, I'll tell you, stick you and Zuckerman in front of any alumni group, and if they don't pull out the wallets, I don't know who, because I've heard Joe in front of, like you, he's passionate about his love for this place, and it's pretty neat. It always got me fired up, and he always hosted our alumni dinners out in New York City, and there'd always be like 4 or 5 of your classmates from '78 that were there.
Yeah.
George Saul and a few of the others that you know. I can't.
I would love to see these guys. You know, and that's why the reunions are so important. Bring them back. Come back. You know, don't be so selfish. You know, I mean, hate to say it, but we can all take a day off and spend a little money and pop back here and, you know, get hit up for a little bit.
You know, you were involved with obviously, you know, some heavy-duty faculty here, and you've been, you know, taking residence through the years. What do you see as the big difference? And now you got a son here, so I mean, you see it. I mean, you see it almost better than most. You have a brother who's 18 years older, who goes in the 50s. Your son's here now, and you're in the middle. What big difference have you seen in the change in medical education from your brother's years to when you were here to now Peter's time?
Well, that's really easy. Technology. It's amazing to see what Peter can do. I watched med school lectures on my couch at home with my son, and I was amazed that I could be taken right into the classroom and learn something. And his ability and the amount of time I spend on a computer nowadays is amazing. In fact, speaking of alumni, my classmate Gordon Faulkner,
Little technology in that family.
dealt with issues as a clinician, pediatrician, working in his clinic, found that information technology was not good, talked to his wife, she sat down and wrote a program, it turned out to be epic. Wow. I mean, look at my classmates.
I'd like to meet Gordon sometime.
Yeah, Gordon was a very quiet, very private person
Is he
who...
like Sally Pratt, was he
Yeah.
a little older?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
He was. And he lived in Madison, and his
Yeah.
wife was in school. So, I mean, he was a great guy. He laughed at me, and that's I judge people on basis of if they shake their head or if they laugh. And if they laugh,
Right.
I go, oh, good,
Yeah.
they get me. If they shake their head, I say, uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
But the technology
Yeah.
that we work with every day in Epic, and I use Epic 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
And regretfully, I see
Yeah,
patients
no,
7 hours a day, and I work on Epic 3 hours a day. No, but when I teach today, I always start off with, you don't have a CAT scan, you don't have an MRI, because I'm taking you back to when I was in school. And I tell them the story about if we were in the ER and a child came in with a head injury, we would order skull x-rays because that's all we had. Yeah. And we only ordered skull x-rays if they had a seizure, if they were knocked unconscious, or if there was a dent in their head. And it goes to show you nowadays, you walk into ER, you get a CT scan before you even get seen by a doctor. My brother Paul, the education was far different. There was a lot of responsibility on the residents and hands-on teaching, smaller classes, more in touch with faculty, more cases to do. Now residents are kind of removed a little bit. The students don't get to touch and take care of patients as much, but I think the technology is the biggest thing that has changed our way of taking care of patients. Very interesting. In my class, I have students with me all the time, and the one thing I teach is there's 15 elements of the history and physical. Chief complaint, history of present illness, past medical history, allergies, meds, surgeries, you have family history, review systems, assessment plan, physical examination. I say to them, which of those is the most important? And they look at me and they say, well, of course, the chief complaint. I go, no. And I said, well, the past medical history. I said, nah, it's important, but the physical exam. Nah, in fact, I don't even like doing physical exams. And they look at me like, what are you doing? And I say to them, the social history. Until you know who that person is, until you can feel their life, until you understand the stresses or the heartaches or the day-to-day troubles that they live with, you can't understand how their disease affects them or how those things affect their disease. So please get to know that person first and foremost. And I think we've lost some of that. We jump right into, let's order a test or let's do an exam.
Yeah, that's good. Great answer. I guarantee that's going to make our, we pull some of these for our website at some point. That would be a good one. I've asked you a lot of questions. You give me a lot of great answers, a lot of great information. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you'd want to mention before you head off to lunch with your son, Peter?
I would have to probably acknowledge you first and foremost for what you've done for us and made us all feel better about the medical school and how we've stayed involved because of your driving force, and I can't thank you enough for that.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Leslie Mack for the influence she's had on all medical students and how she affected us when we were scared and alone, and she befriended us. And the faculty you can't be friends with, and you need people that are there to support you. So my hat off to both of you for what you've done during and after my graduation from the school.
Well, John, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, a pleasure working with you, and continuing to know you and work with you.
I ain't
Thanks so
going
much.
anywhere.
I know that.
I'm still at the grocery store.
I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. Thank you. I'm going to